What's going on, Headliner Nation? Welcome back to the Fantasy Headliners. I've got my top 30 wide receivers here for you in week 11. Let's roll into it and start back at number 30 and work our way forward. And don't forget, wait until the very end because I've got some notable players who haven't made the top 30 for one reason or another, and I'll touch on them at that point. So let's go ahead and jump into it right now. Talking about number 30, Devontae Parker. The ceiling with the wide receivers in Miami just isn't that high right now as Tua continues to just work his way back and get back to, the old Tua, the one that we saw while he was at Alabama. It's going to happen eventually. Hasn't happened as of yet, but he is making progress each and every week. And Devontae Parker is the wide receiver one. Hopefully will become a benefactor of that pretty soon. Jamison Crowder at number 29. We want to get Jamison Crowder going again. Hopefully that happens this coming week. He's dealt with some injuries, obviously been in and out. However, with Joe Flacco at the helm, they've actually been moving the ball a little bit better than what they have in the past. So hopefully a connection with Jamison Crowder continues moving forward. DJ Chark at number 28. For DJ Chark this week, I don't love the matchup in terms of upside, but I will still play him this week. Again, nothing against him being down here at number 28, other than the fact is I just don't think he has the upside that some of the other wide receivers will have this week, and we're just going to compensate for that by keeping him a little bit lower. Again, going up against Pittsburgh, they do allow some big plays, but where will those big plays come? How many will there be? That's the question with DJ Chark. At number 27, Robert Woods. Don't love having Robert Woods this low, but as of right now, Cooper Kupp, who you see a few spots higher than him, is getting a little bit more volume pushed his way. Robert Woods has become a guy who we can still start as a wide receiver 2 or a wide receiver 3, but some of those wide receiver 1 numbers he was putting up when he was scoring touchdowns at the beginning of the year, they've disappeared a little bit. Is that on Jared Goff? Is that on Sean McVay? Who is that on? Well, whoever it's on, they got to get this offense rolling again, and they got to do it soon. Until then, Robert Woods is going to be a little bit lower. T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd right next to each other here at 25 and 26 going up against Washington. I expect both of them to see about the same amount of volume. T. Higgins should see some more passes down the field. If he can connect with Joe Burrow on one of those, that would be excellent because that's going to give him a little bit of a bump up on Tyler Boyd. I still got both of these guys as starts this week, but as we've seen in the past with Washington's defense, they're just not getting a whole lot of credit this year, but they've done pretty good at containing the pass. Will Fuller at number 24 going up against New England. Again, another situation where, we're going to start somebody. We just need to be careful about the ceiling this week. It could be a little bit lower. Cooper Kupp at number 23. Already talked about him a little bit along with Robert Woods. Kupp is the guy that's seeing a little bit more volume right now, which obviously, that's what we've seen from Cooper Kupp in the past, right? And that's what we have been waiting on to come back. Well, it started to come back a little bit. I mean, the dude had 20 targets in week 8 against Miami. Only 7 last week. But again, so far this season, over the last several games, at the beginning of the year, only 5 and 6, and then he had a 10-target game. And since then, 7, 8, 9, 6, 20, and 7. So he's seeing just a little bit more volume come his way. The one thing that we'd like to see from him a little bit more is some targets in the red zone. At number 22, Tyler Lockett. As of this recording, Tyler Lockett is questionable and expected to go, but after talking with our own Dr. Ethan Turner here, he could be a guy that is limited in some capacity. So we've got him lower on the radar this week. I will tell you this. If you've got somebody that you believe to have higher upside than Tyler Lockett, you could go with them this week if you want to. But keep in mind, if you lose your week because you left Tyler Lockett on the bench and he goes for 30 plus, that's part of the risk here. Okay? If you lose your week because Tyler Lockett goes for 5 points, that's part of the issue here. Okay? That's where we need to make our decision. Me personally, if I own Tyler Lockett tonight, I wait a little bit longer to set my lineup, and then I kind of go from there. If it sounds like he's going to be limited in some capacity, some of these guys that I have listed behind him, I would start over Tyler Lockett just to play it safe. Number 21, Robbie Anderson. Robbie Anderson got off to a really hot start this season, and since then just hasn't done as much as we would like. I mean, we bought into Robbie Anderson early in the season after we definitely saw what appeared to be some really, really good chemistry with Teddy Bridgewater. That's what we want. That's what we wanted, was that chemistry. We wanted to see Teddy Bridgewater pushing the ball down the field. However, Teddy Bridgewater dealing with a slight MCL sprain, and because of that, a little bit worried about Robbie Anderson and his work down the field. He's still getting a lot of targets. However, he hasn't really been turning in those big plays that we saw to begin the year. I mean, to begin the year, his yards per reception were 19, 12, 11, 12, 14, 19, 12. Since week 8, it's 9, 7, and 5. He's had Atlanta, he's had Kansas City, he's had Tampa Bay. Atlanta and Kansas City are two teams that you should be able to put up some bigger plays on. And then, of course, Tampa, like we've talked about, they are a team that can contain wide receivers and contain the passing game. That's why I'm a little bit concerned with him right now, and I've got him lower after having him so much higher this season. Right now, for me, both him and DJ Moore are kind of dependent on those big plays. However, DJ Moore is finding them more often than what Robbie Anderson is. At number 20, Chris Godwin. This is a situation where you're just going to have to kind of be lower on these wide receivers for the time being until we kind of see it play out, is who's going to be that main target. Now, there is a little bit of difference here, right? You talk about like Pittsburgh and you talk about Tampa Bay. Both of these teams have 3 high-caliber wide receivers that can put up some really good points. The problem is Tampa Bay also has a run game that they like to lean on, and they also have 2 tight ends that they like to use. For Pittsburgh, they like to throw the ball. Yes, they will use James Conner, but it's not necessarily leaning on the run, and Eric Ebron is kind of a non-factor at this point. So that's why Tampa Bay is a little bit lower for me, because they have some extra things there that are kind of in play, some extra intangibles that we kind of have to just bring into the equation in terms of whether or not these guys have a high ceiling every single week. Now, I will say Chris Godwin, to me, is the safest option for the wide receivers. Is his ceiling going to be limited on a weekly basis? Yes. Is it going to be limited going up against a team like the Rams? Yes, even though I don't think he's going to see Jalen Ramsey, still a defense that can limit passing and limit yards to wide receivers. So for Chris Godwin, down at 20 this week. DJ Moore, just brought him up a minute ago when talking about Robbie Anderson. He's at number 19 for me, going up against Detroit this week. He would be higher, but again, is Teddy Bridgewater going to be starting this week? DJ Moore could be making a move up my rankings as we find out more as the week go on. At number 18, Jakobi Meyers, my Manscaped must-start of the week, going up against Houston this week. Houston, a team that gives up quite a bit of fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Not only that, but over the last few weeks, Jakobi Meyers is a guy that has seen a lot of targets. Since week 7, he has 6, 10, 14, and 7 targets. Now, he hasn't scored any touchdowns, and he really only has one game in which that he has had a good amount of yards, right? He had the 169-yard game against the Jets. Outside of that, 60, 58, and 59. Now, those, again, 2 of them, Buffalo and Baltimore. Those are a lot better competition than what Houston is. So Jakobi Meyers, a guy that is getting a ton of targets. I think he's like 7th in targets since the beginning of week 7. He is a guy that we can go ahead and put in with some confidence because he's going to see quite a bit of those targets. And this is a game where New England will probably need to throw the ball quite a bit. Houston is going to be able to put up some points as well. New England's going to have to throw the ball around. Cam to Myers has been something over the last several weeks has been guaranteed. Not necessarily in terms of points, but potential volume. At number 17, Christian Kirk. This is a guy that continuously underrated. I've continued to have him as a start. I've had him outside the top 30 a couple of times just because when you've got a guy like DeAndre Hopkins across from you, it is hard to really prepare for what kind of upside you'll see every single week. But he is a guy since really week 4. He had week 1 and week 2, didn't play in week 3. Since week 4, he is a guy that's been a top 12 wide receiver for you in half PPR formats. Now he gets a great matchup on Thursday Night Football against the Seattle Seahawks. We can roll with Christian Kirk this week. Chase Claypool. We've got Chase Claypool and we've got Juju Smith-Schuster here in the top, or in the 11 to 20. And then we've got Deontay Johnson, who we'll talk about in a minute. And I mentioned it on the start and sit video. For me, Chase Claypool has the widest variance of fantasy outcomes. He might have the highest ceiling, but he might have the lowest floor. This is the guy that we put in our lineup, and you don't know what you're going to get every single week. Right now, Juju Smith-Schuster has made himself out to be the safest bet of any of these wide receivers. He is the guy who, after everybody gave up on him a few weeks ago, he has really bounced back. I mean, he had an awful performance in week 6 against Cleveland. 4 targets, 2 receptions for 6 yards. Since then, he's gone 14-9-85, 8-7-67, 7-6-93, and 13-9-77, scoring touchdowns in each of his last 2 games. That right there for me is why he is the safest. And Diontae Johnson, we'll talk about him in a minute. But out of these 2 right here, again, Juju is the safest. Chase Claypool has the largest variance. At number 15, Calvin Ridley, as of this recording, still has not been able to practice in full. We have to keep an eye on that foot injury. I've got him here because even if he does play, he might be a little bit limited. Don't like to see that. We're going to have to keep a big eye on him as the week goes on. A.J. Brown at number 14. This is not a matchup that I'm absolutely in love with A.J. Brown going up against Baltimore. Again, he's going to be a start, though, because the big play capability always there. Juju Smith-Schuster, already mentioned him when talking about Chase Claypool. At number 12, Amari Cooper brought this on the start-sit video as well. This is a guy that is still top 10 in targets, top 10 in yards. He is a guy that is continuously being viewed as the number 1 weapon in this offense. It's not Zeke Elliott anymore. This is an offense that has to throw the ball quite a bit. And this week, we get to go up against Minnesota. Minnesota and Dallas, 2 teams that allow the 4th and 5th most fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. We could see a lot of points scored this week. Speaking of Amari Cooper in that matchup, we've got Justin Jefferson at number 11 with that matchup. Again, Justin Jefferson is in the top 12 for me this week because the dude has shown over the last several weeks he is a dynamic playmaker. And personally, even though there's still a sense of comfort between Kirk Cousins and Adam Thielen, I can see it in the game plan that Kirk Cousins views Justin Jefferson as a bigger target if they are not in the red zone. I mean, last week in their game last week, Adam Thielen, he had one acrobatic catch that was a nice catch in the end zone, and then he had that other red zone reception when they were on the 5-yard line. Outside of that, the dude had 3 drops, and he did not look particularly great if they were not in the red zone. In the area, if they're not within the 20, Justin Jefferson seems to be the guy that Kirk Cousins is looking at more often than what Adam Thielen is. So Justin Jefferson absolutely has some big play upside every single week because I think that that's who they're looking for in those circumstances. At number 7 is where Adam Thielen is, and we'll talk about him in just a second. At number 10, Diontae Johnson. Again, when talking about the Pittsburgh wide receivers, number 1, excellent matchup for them this week going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. This team allows a ton of fantasy points to opposing wide receivers, but not only that, they allow a lot of big plays, and they allow a lot of yards to wide receivers. A lot of opportunities for Diontae Johnson this week. He might have a ceiling that is just below Chase Claypool, but he has a floor that is much higher than Chase Claypool. My number 9, Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas is going to continue, again, to get tossed in here in the top 10. He's the number 1 target for Drew Brees. However, Drew Brees now, off to the side. We got to rely on Jameis Winston. Are you worried about that? Me personally, right now, no, because Michael Thomas and Chris Godwin are kind of similar in terms of the wide receiver and the routes that they run. These are both guys that like to run those slants. They like to work over the middle of the field. They like to work those intermediate routes. Those are not guys that are deep plays. And Jameis Winston made Chris Godwin, the wide receiver 1 or 2 last year, depending on what type of a format that you play in. Michael Thomas, to me, has absolutely no issues with Jameis Winston under center. Number 8, DK Metcalf. Have him a little bit lower because if there is a banged up Tyler Lockett this week, I don't think that necessarily helps DK Metcalf. He's going to get Patrick Peterson. He's still a top 10 wide receiver, though. If you own DK Metcalf, you play DK Metcalf. Adam Thielen at number 7. Again, mentioned him when I talked about Justin Jefferson a little bit as well. Adam Thielen, 3 drops last week. 3 crucial drops. Did not look that great. If they are running the ball a lot with Dalvin Cook, Adam Thielen's not seeing a ton of targets. Adam Thielen is making his moves, is making his basically fantasy value right now with those touchdowns and in the red zone. Justin Jefferson seems to be the guy that they're looking at outside of those opportunities. Terry McLaurin at number 6, with Terry McLaurin here going up against the Cincinnati Bengals. A huge matchup for him. People ask me about Alex Smith. I don't care about Alex Smith. Terry McLaurin is uber talented. Smith knows that. Smith is going to continue to target Terry McLaurin, and Terry McLaurin is a guy that just doesn't have to go down the field. He can do things all over the field, and that only helps his fantasy value. Keenan Allen at number 5. And let's hope for all of our sakes that Justin Herbert's quarterback powers were not included in his hair. Probably should have never gotten that haircut, but that's okay. If anybody were to be, anyone would have an issue with that, it's going to be Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen, I've said it over and over and over, he may end up being the number 1 value in all fantasy drafts this year. The dude is absolutely balled out. Owners were scared about him because of the Tyrod Taylor quarterback start to begin the season. That turned over to Justin Herbert rather quickly, and Keenan Allen has not looked back. And then your top 4 are guys that you see every single week, right? Devontae Adams, DeAndre Hopkins, Tyreek Hill, Julio Jones. If you own one of these guys, or if you own multiple of these guys, you put them all in your lineup. Nothing really to talk about there. So let's jump to our notable players real quick. Notable players to talk about this week: Mike Evans. We've got him listed as a sit this week because more than likely he's going to have Jalen Ramsey, and I don't love that situation, especially with all the other options. If you're going to be guarded by Jalen Ramsey the entire time, it doesn't make sense for Tom Brady to force the ball at you over and over and over because you have plenty of other weapons. So Mike Evans might not see that much value this week, might not see that many targets. Because of that, we're going to list him as a sit. Jalen Reagor and Travis Fulgham, both of those guys are starts this week. I like them in that offense. We just need to see a little bit more out of them to determine where the ceiling will end up being moving forward. Jalen Reagor, the number 1 wide receiver for me there in Philadelphia. Ceiling's just a little bit lower for those guys right now. Marvin Jones Jr., also a start for me this week. Just doesn't quite crack the top 30 this week. And that is why I have got him listed here, just so you know. And remember, he is a start for me. Going up against Carolina, it could be a difficult matchup, but, he's played well against some other difficult teams over the last few weeks as well. Hopefully he scores a touchdown. If he does, he could be in like that 70 to 80 yard range. It could have him just inside that top 30 there, maybe even a little bit higher. Michael Pittman also on here as well, and Emmanuel Sanders, because both of them are sits as of right now. But neither of them could be sits come Sunday, because we're waiting to hear about a couple of different injuries. For Michael Pittman, it's Jair Alexander. Will he end up being back this week? Will Kevin King end up being back this week? Those are things that we need to keep an eye on. For Emmanuel Sanders is with Tre'Quan Smith. Tre'Quan Smith is in the concussion protocol right now, and I have Smith listed as a start over Emmanuel Sanders, but there's no guarantee that Smith will end up missing this week as of this recording. Which brings me to my next point, Headliner Nation. When you make comments in our comment section, don't come into the comments and say so-and-so is out this week or so-and-so will play this week. You don't know. You're not a doctor. You're just assuming at that point. But if any one of our viewers sees that and says, oh, hey, they might end up playing, they might not go double check that, and they might make a decision based on you dropping some knowledge that really isn't knowledge. It's just you either trying to defend somebody or you trying to make a point without having a whole lot to back it up. Okay, that's why we have a doctor on staff here to help with that, and that's why we dig into the research, and we also keep things open for the week. I don't really talk about the injuries too often at the beginning of the week because we record our videos so soon. I don't want to say, oh, hey, this guy could be an issue unless I truly believe after looking at it somebody is going to be out. When you have somebody that's in the concussion protocol, they could clear on a Thursday or a Friday or something like that, and they could be good to go on a Sunday. It's a little bit different for someone that might be dealing with a foot injury or an ankle or a hamstring or something like that. Coming back from the concussion, you might not have as many variables in play in terms of ramping you back up. If you're coming back from an injury, and this is part of the problem with football in 2020, obviously. I'm not trying to discredit concussions in any way, shape, or form, but when you have guys working back from a different type of injury, you tend to take things a little bit slower with them if you're a football team. Again, I'm not trying to downplay concussions or anything like that. I'm just trying to make a point, because in the start and sit video, I did see a few people come in and comment and say, oh, so-and-so is playing this week. If someone sees that, they might automatically assume it's going to happen, and you're just saying that because that's what you think, okay? You don't know that for sure. So with those comments, if that's what you think, that's fine. There's really no reason to comment with that. If they end up playing, we'll update throughout the week. just like we do in these videos. So, Headliner Nation, that's going to do it for me today. Do me a favor, if you appreciate that content, hit the like button down below. As always, leave me a comment if you got a question about anyone specific you didn't see here today. If your question is, do I start somebody over somebody else? They're in this video. That's going to answer that question for you. And as always, hit that subscribe button if you're new to the Fantasy Headliners and become a part of Headliner Nation today. All right, I'm going to get out of here because it's clear that I have not had enough sleep. I need to go do some of that. Get ready for Thursday Night Football. Headliner Nation, stay safe, stay healthy. I'll catch you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.